The sound of mocking laughter cut through the morning air at Memorial Plaza. "Hey, look at that crazy woman over there." Sergeant Brick Holloway pointed toward the figure huddled beneath the old oak tree, barely 20 feet from the memorial wall. A faded military jacket hung loose on her shoulders, torn at the seams. A weathered backpack leaned against her side, its olive canvas bleached by years of sun and rain. Gray-streaked hair fell across half her face like a curtain drawn against the world. Ivory did not move. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" Brick strode closer, his voice rising loud enough for the growing crowd of Memorial Day volunteers to hear. Workers setting up folding chairs paused. Families arranging flowers at the base of the granite wall turned to watch. "This area ain't for homeless people. Get lost." She remained still. Only her eyes shifted, steel gray and unreadable, flicking toward him for one heartbeat before returning to the memorial wall. 47 names carved into black granite. 47 souls she could recite from memory. Captain Floyd Mercer approached with the confident stride of a man who had never doubted his place in the world. At 31, he wore his captain's bars like a crown, his uniform pressed sharp enough to cut glass. "Sergeant, let me handle this." He crouched down, close enough that Ivory could smell his expensive cologne, and let his voice drip with condescension. "Listen here, old woman. Tomorrow we have VIPs coming from Washington. Senators, generals, real heroes. You're making our base look bad. Either leave on your own, or I'll have the MPS drag you out. Your choice." Ivory said nothing. Her fingers brushed the ground beside her, a movement so subtle that no one noticed she was counting her own heartbeats. Steady, controlled, the way she had learned to do in places these men could not imagine. 47 names on that wall, 47 people she had failed to save. The click of expensive heels announced the arrival of Sherry Mercer, the captain's wife and self-appointed queen of the Officers' Wives Association. She surveyed Ivory the way one might examine something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "This is absolutely disgusting, Floyd. A day meant to honor our heroes, and we have to look at this." She waved a manicured hand at Ivory's ragged form. "Can't someone do something?" More people gathered now, 15, 20, families with children, young soldiers in pressed uniforms, elderly veterans in caps embroidered with ship names and battalion numbers, all watching, all waiting. None of them noticed the faded patch on the old backpack, its threads worn almost invisible. None of them saw the scar that peeked from beneath Ivory's collar when the wind shifted her jacket, and certainly none of them knew that within the next 6 hours, 3 Black Hawk helicopters would descend upon this very plaza, carrying a 4-star general who would demand to see the woman they were trying so hard to throw away. The morning sun climbed higher over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across Memorial Plaza as the confrontation drew its first breath. Master Sergeant Amos Pritchard watched from his wheelchair near the refreshment tent, his 72-year-old eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his veteran's cap. Something about the woman bothered him, not her appearance, though that was certainly unusual. No, it was something else. The way she sat, the angle of her shoulders, the almost imperceptible sweep of her gaze across the crowd every few seconds. He had seen that posture before, decades ago, in places where sitting wrong could get you killed. "Grandpa?" His 16-year-old grandson Connor appeared at his elbow, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You okay? You're staring." "Just thinking, boy." Amos accepted the coffee but did not drink. His attention remained fixed on the woman as Brick Holloway summoned 2 more guards to form a loose perimeter around her. "Just thinking." Tabitha Weston arrived like a hurricane in Sensible Flats, her clipboard clutched against her chest like a shield. As the Memorial Day event coordinator, she had spent 3 months planning every detail of tomorrow's ceremony, the flower arrangements, the seating charts, the precise timing of the 21-gun salute. She had not planned for a homeless woman squatting next to the memorial wall like some kind of human eyesore. "This is unacceptable," her voice pitched high enough to carry across the plaza. "Do you have any idea who's coming tomorrow? Senator Ashford, General Crawford." "The press will be everywhere, and the first thing they'll see is her." She jabbed a finger toward Ivory. "I want her gone, now. I don't care how you do it." Brick grinned, clearly enjoying his moment of authority. "You heard the lady, vagrant. Time to move." For the first time since the confrontation began, Ivory rose to her feet. The movement was fluid, economical. She unfolded from the ground with a grace that seemed at odds with her weathered appearance, her spine straightening into a posture that made Brick take an unconscious half-step backward, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, hands loose at her sides. Parade rest. The realization flickered across Corporal Levi Stanton's face as he watched from behind Brick. He had seen that stance every day of basic training, drilled into him by instructors who would accept nothing less than perfection. But before he could voice the thought, Sherry Mercer had already moved on to her next attack. "Oh, so it can stand." Sherry's lip curled as she pulled a water bottle from her designer purse. "Here, drink this. You probably need it more than I do." She threw the bottle at Ivory's feet, letting it bounce in the dust. "Go on. Take it and leave." What happened next made 3 people gasp. Ivory's hand snapped out and caught the bottle before it hit the ground. One smooth motion, no wasted movement. Her eyes never left the memorial wall. Private First Class Chloe Ramirez, standing near the flower arrangements with an armful of white roses, felt her stomach tighten. She had seen that kind of reflexes exactly once before, during a demonstration by the base's hand-to-hand combat instructors. The kind of muscle memory that took years to develop, the kind that never really went away. "Lucky catch," Floyd muttered, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Gaston Reeves pushed through the crowd, smartphone already recording. The local reporter had been covering military events for 6 years, ever since his own less-than-honorable discharge had ended his brief Army career. He had learned to smell a story, and this one reeked of potential clicks. "Hey there, ma'am." Gaston Reeves, Fayetteville Observer. He positioned his phone to capture both Ivory's piece and the gathering crowd. "Mind telling our viewers where you served? Or did you just steal that jacket from a donation bin?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back shouted something about welfare queens and taxpayer dollars. Ivory bent down and picked up a crumpled napkin that had blown against her boot. Her fingers moved automatically, folding the thin paper into a precise triangle. Fold, crease, fold, crease. The same triangle used to fold a burial flag. The same motions taught to honor guards at Arlington. Ginger Morales noticed. The cafe owner had come to deliver coffee and pastries for the volunteers. But now she stood frozen beside her delivery cart, watching those practiced hands transform trash into something almost sacred. She had seen Ivory before. Every Memorial Day for 5 years, this same woman appeared near the wall, sat in silence, and vanished when the ceremonies ended. Ginger had never spoken to her, never asked her name, but she had watched and she had wondered. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story of hidden valor and the true meaning of service, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. We bring you powerful stories of unsung heroes every week, veterans whose sacrifices often go unnoticed until moments like what you're about to witness. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another story that honors those who served in silence. Colonel Jasper Blackwood emerged from the administrative building just as the confrontation reached its first peak. As the base commander, he had been reviewing the final security protocols for tomorrow's ceremony when his aide informed him of the disturbance. Now he surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of a man who had managed crises on 4 continents. "What's going on here, Captain Mercer?" Floyd snapped to attention, his face flushing with the eager energy of a subordinate about to impress his superior. "Sir, we have a vagrant refusing to vacate the memorial area. I was just about to call the MPS to remove her." Blackwood's gaze shifted to Ivory. She had not moved since rising to her feet, had not acknowledged his presence or his rank. Most civilians, faced with a full colonel in dress uniform, would show some reaction, nervousness, deference, even hostility. But this woman stood as still as the granite wall behind her, her eyes fixed on something far beyond this moment. "Ma'am," Blackwood kept his voice neutral, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the immediate area. This is a restricted zone for tomorrow's ceremony." Ivory's head turned slowly. For the first time, she looked directly at one of her harassers. Blackwood found himself staring into eyes the color of storm clouds, eyes that held neither fear nor anger nor pleading. Just a vast, quiet emptiness that made something in his chest tighten. "The wall stays open to the public until 1800 hours, she said. Her voice emerged rough from disuse, barely above a whisper. "I checked the base regulations." Brick snorted. "Oh, so now it's a lawyer. Lady, I don't care what you think you read. The colonel just gave you an order. I'm not military." Ivory's attention returned to the wall. "I'm not obligated to follow his orders. I'm obligated to be here." The words hung in the air like smoke. Obligated, not wanted, not chose. Obligated. Levi Stanton felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. He leaned toward that brick and whispered, "Sarge, the way she stands. It's like my instructors at boot camp, exactly like them." "Shut up, Stanton." Brick's jaw tightened. He did not like being made to look uncertain in front of the colonel. "She's just some crazy homeless woman who found an old jacket somewhere. Probably dug it out of a dumpster." But Amos Pritchard had wheeled his chair closer, his aged eyes fixed on Ivory's backpack. The morning light had shifted, and for just a moment he could make out the faded outline of a patch on the canvas. A skull. Roman numerals. His heart stuttered in his chest. No, it couldn't be. "Connor," his voice came out strange, tight. "Go find Colonel Blackwood's aide. Tell him I need to speak with the colonel, privately. It's urgent." "But, Grandpa..." "Now, boy." Connor hesitated, confused by the sudden intensity in his grandfather's voice, but he had learned long ago not to argue when the old man used that tone. He set down the coffee cups and hurried toward the administrative building. The confrontation might have continued along its predictable path, might have escalated through threats and counter-threats until the MPS arrived to drag Ivory away in handcuffs, if not for what happened next. A commotion erupted near the refreshment tent. Shouts, a scream. The crowd shifted like a startled flock of birds, heads turning toward the source of the disturbance. "Someone call 911! He's not breathing!" An elderly man had collapsed beside the coffee urns. 70-something, wearing a Korean War veteran's cap, his face gray and his hands clutching at his chest. The volunteers around him stood frozen, phones half raised, paralyzed by the sudden emergency. Floyd Mercer barked orders that no one seemed to hear. Tabitha Weston dropped her clipboard and began screaming for a medic. Brick Holloway took 3 steps toward the fallen man before realizing he had no idea what to do. Ivory moved. She crossed the distance in seconds, dropping to her knees beside the veteran, with a fluidity that drew startled looks from everyone watching. Her hands found his neck, checking the pulse. 2 fingers on the carotid. Light pressure. Count. "Loosen his belt." Her voice snapped through the chaos like a whip crack. "Elevate his legs. Someone get me aspirin if you have it." Chloe Ramirez found herself obeying before her conscious mind could catch up. She knelt beside the old man and fumbled with his belt buckle, her hands trembling, while Ivory's remained rock steady. Pulse is thready but present. He's not in cardiac arrest yet, but he's close. Ivory tilted the man's head back, checked his airway, positioned him with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Intense. In blown-out buildings. In the back of helicopters racing against death. Dr. Edwin Cho pushed through the crowd, his medical bag banging against his hip. The base physician had been reviewing charts in his office when he heard the commotion, and he arrived expecting to find chaos and panic. Instead, he found a homeless woman performing textbook TCCC protocols on a cardiac patient, tactical combat casualty care. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. "She needs space," he announced, dropping beside Ivory. "Everyone back. Give us room." He pulled out his stethoscope and began his own assessment, but his eyes kept drifting to Ivory's hands. The way she maintained pressure points, the way she had positioned the patient's body, the way she counted breaths under her breath, lips moving silently. "You've done this before." It was not a question. Ivory did not answer. Her attention remained fixed on the old man's face, watching the color slowly return as his body stabilized. "Ma'am," Dr. Cho's voice dropped low, meant only for her ears. "That's not YouTube medicine. That's field training. Combat medicine. Where did you learn? Medics here now." Ivory rose to her feet, stepping back as 2 EMTs arrived with a stretcher. "He'll be fine. It was angina, not a full infarction. Just make sure he gets checked for arterial blockage." She turned to walk away, and that was when Gaston Reeves made his move. The reporter had been filming the entire incident, and now he positioned himself directly in Ivory's path, phone thrust forward like a weapon. Well, that was quite a show. Care to explain how a homeless woman knows military-grade medical protocols? Brick Holloway flanked him, emboldened by the crowd's attention. "Yeah, how about that? You some kind of combat medic who fell on hard times? Spent your VA benefits on booze?" Laughter from somewhere in the crowd. Nervous laughter, the kind people use to reassure themselves that everything is normal, that the world still makes sense. Ivory stopped. Her eyes met Gaston's through his phone screen. and something in her gaze made him take an involuntary step backward. "I learned," she said quietly, "in places you wouldn't survive long enough to film." The words hung in the air as she walked past him, back toward her spot beneath the oak tree, back toward the wall and its 47 names. Dr. Cho watched her go, his brow furrowed. Then he looked down at his own hands, steady and skilled after 20 years of medical training, and thought about how her hands had been steadier. The morning stretched into noon as the confrontation evolved into something more complex. Word of Ivory's medical intervention spread through the base like wildfire, and opinions divided sharply. Some of the older veterans, men and women who had seen things they never spoke about, regarded her with new respect. But Floyd Mercer and his allies only grew more determined to prove that her display of competence was a fluke, a trick, anything other than evidence that they had been wrong about her. "Anyone can memorize a procedure from the internet," Floyd declared to the small audience that had gathered around him near the coffee station. "Doesn't mean anything. She probably practiced that 100 times hoping to impress someone." Sherry nodded eagerly, though her eyes kept darting toward Ivory with something that might have been unease. "Exactly. Those homeless people will do anything for attention. She just wanted to make herself look good." Amos Pritchard had positioned his wheelchair where he could maintain a clear line of sight to both Ivory and the group around Floyd. His grandson had delivered the message, and now they were waiting for Colonel Blackwood to free himself from a phone call with the Pentagon. But the old man could not shake the feeling that time was running out, that something was building toward a moment none of them could anticipate. The patch. He needed to see that patch again. "Connor, go buy me a sandwich from Mrs. Morales' cart, the one closest to that woman." "Grandpa, you just had coffee, and you're being weird." "I'm 72 years old. I'm allowed to be weird." "Now go." Connor sighed and headed toward Ginger's cart, which had indeed been positioned strategically close to Ivory's oak tree. Whether by accident or design, the cafe owner had created a small buffer zone around the mysterious woman, a neutral space where the harassers seemed reluctant to enter. Ivory had not returned to sitting. She stood now, with her back against the oak's trunk, her eyes tracing the names on the wall one by one. Her lips moved occasionally, forming silent words. Names, ranks, dates, a liturgy of the lost. Connor bought a turkey sandwich he did not want and tried to look casual as he drifted closer to Ivory's position. Up close, she seemed smaller than he had expected, thin, weathered. But there was something about her stillness that reminded him of the big cats at the zoo, the way they could appear completely relaxed while remaining ready to explode into motion at any moment. And then he saw it. The backpack had shifted when she stood, and now the faded patch was fully visible in the afternoon light, a skull with a number 7 in Roman numerals. Below it, nearly invisible, a row of tiny stars. Connor felt his breath catch. He had grown up hearing his grandfather's war stories, including the classified ones that Amos shared only after too much whiskey on Christmas Eve. Stories about ghost units, phantom soldiers, the ones who did the jobs that never made it into official records, the skull, the Roman numeral, Unit 7. He walked back to his grandfather's wheelchair with legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. "Grandpa," his voice cracked. "The patch. I saw it. 7. A skull. And stars. Lots of stars." Amos Pritchard closed his eyes. His weathered hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair hard enough to turn his knuckles white. "Dear God," he whispered. "It's her. It's actually her." "Who? Grandpa, who is she?" But Amos was already wheeling himself toward Colonel Blackwood, who had just emerged from the administrative building with his aide in tow. The old man moved faster than Connor had ever seen him move, his arms pumping the wheels with desperate energy. Colonel Blackwood, you need to stop this. Right now. You don't understand who that woman is." Blackwood turned, his expression shifting from irritation to concern as he took in the veteran's obvious distress. "Master Sergeant Pritchard, what's wrong?" "That woman." Amos pointed a trembling finger toward the oak tree. "The one your people have been harassing all morning. Did anyone bother to look at her backpack, at the patch? It's an old military patch, probably stolen or bought at a surplus store." "No, sir. No." Amos's voice broke. "Unit 7. The skull. The stars. Colonel, that's a phantom patch. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Phantom. The ones who don't exist." Blackwood's face went pale. Across the plaza, Floyd Mercer had grown tired of waiting. The crowd's attention had drifted after the medical incident, and he needed to reassert his dominance before his father heard that some vagrant had upstaged him at his own base. "All right, Enough of this circus. He strode toward Ivory, Brick, and two other guards flanking him. Ma'am, I'm giving you one last chance. Show me some ID. Prove you're a veteran, or I'm having you arrested for trespassing and impersonating military personnel. Ivory did not turn around. I haven't impersonated anything. That jacket has unit insignia on it. That's a federal offense if you didn't earn it. I earned it. Gaston Reeves appeared at Floyd's elbow, his phone still recording. Actually, Captain, I might be able to help with that. I've been doing some digging. He held up his phone, showing a military records database on the screen. Ivory Brennan, discharged from the Army in 2018. Want to know what kind of discharge? Floyd's smile spread slowly across his face. Do tell. Other than honorable. She got kicked out, Captain. Whatever she did, it was bad enough that they didn't want her, but not quite bad enough for a court-martial. Gaston turned the phone toward the crowd. So much for our mystery hero. Just another washout pretending to be something she's not. The crowd's murmur shifted, ugly undertones emerging. Sherry Mercer laughed, high and bright and cruel. I knew it! She stepped forward, emboldened by the revelation. I knew there was something wrong with her. No real veteran would end up homeless and pathetic like that. She probably stole from her unit, or worse. Ivory's shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. What's the matter, sweetheart? Brick's voice dripped with contempt. Cat got your tongue, or are you just embarrassed that we caught you in your little act? Chloe Ramirez had heard enough. The young private had been watching the confrontation with growing disgust, remembering how Ivory's hands had moved with such certainty over the fallen veteran's chest, how her voice had cut through the panic and brought order to chaos. Whatever the record said, whatever happened in 2018, that kind of skill was not fake. But before she could speak up, a new voice cut through the crowd. The database is wrong. Colonel Blackwood strode toward them, his face carved from stone. Behind him, Amos Pritchard wheeled furiously to keep up. Sir? Floyd's confident smile flickered. I just got off the phone with the Pentagon, Captain Mercer. I asked them to pull the file on Ivory Brennan. Blackwood's jaw tightened. They told me the file doesn't exist. More accurately, they told me the file exists but requires level 5 clearance to access. Do you understand what that means? Sir, It means that whatever discharge records your reporter friend found are cover documents, fake entries designed to protect someone's real identity. The colonel stopped in front of Ivory, his eyes scanning her face as if seeing her for the first time. Ma'am, I think you and I need to have a conversation. Ivory finally turned from the wall. No, Colonel, she said quietly. We don't. The moment stretched. Two officers facing each other across an invisible divide, one in pressed uniform and polished rank, the other in rags and silence. Gaston Reeves recovered first. Wait, are you saying she's actually somebody? Some kind of classified operator? He laughed, but the sound came out wrong, nervous. Come on, Colonel, look at her. She's a homeless woman who found an old jacket. You're telling me the Pentagon is protecting her identity? I'm telling you to turn off your phone and delete that footage before I have you arrested for attempting to expose classified information. The crowd had gone silent. Even Sherry Mercer's perpetual smirk had faded into something closer to uncertainty. Floyd Mercer felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. All morning he had been so certain, so confident in his judgment of the worthless vagrant. His father was a general. His career was destined for greatness. And now some homeless woman was threatening to make him look like a fool in front of his subordinates, his wife, his commanding officer. No, he refused to accept it. With respect, sir, this is ridiculous. Floyd stepped forward, deliberately positioning himself between Blackwood and Ivory. Even if she was somebody once, she's clearly not anymore. Look at her. Whatever she was, she threw it away. Probably mental illness, PTSD. Happens to weak people who can't handle the pressure. Brick nodded eagerly. Captain's right, sir. My cousin came back from Afghanistan all messed up in the head, too. They just can't hack it. We shouldn't have to treat every broken vet like some kind of hero. Something changed in Ivory's eyes. A flicker, a spark. The first sign of genuine emotion she had shown all day. It was not anger, it was grief. Amos Pritchard saw it. The old veteran, who had survived 3 wars and buried more friends than he could count, recognized that look as clearly as his own face in the mirror. It was the look of someone who had lost everything and kept living anyway. That's enough. His voice rang out sharper than anyone expected from such an elderly frame. Captain Mercer, I served with this woman's husband. Captain Marcus Brennan, 2nd Battalion, killed in Somalia in 2005. One of the finest officers I ever knew. And if his widow is standing here today, in whatever condition, she deserves your respect, not your contempt." Ivory's head turned toward the old man. For a moment, something human surfaced in those storm-gray eyes. Recognition, remembrance. "Marcus spoke about you," she said softly. "Amos Pritchard, the sergeant who carried 3 wounded men across 2 miles of open desert." Amos's eyes glistened. He remembered that? He remembered everything. The plaza had gone completely still. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Floyd Mercer looked between Ivory and Amos, his expression shifting from confusion to something darker. This was not how things were supposed to go. This was not the script he had written in his head. Fine. So her husband was a hero. That doesn't make her one. No, Ivory agreed. It doesn't. And somehow, the simple agreement cut deeper than any argument could have. We're about to reach the moment everything changes. If this story is giving you chills, drop a comment below, telling us what you think Ivory's real identity might be. Your theories fuel our community, and we read every single one. Also, share this video with someone who respects our veterans. They need to see what happens next. Now, let's get back to Memorial Plaza. Senator Delilah Ashford's motorcade arrived at 14:30 hours, a full day ahead of schedule. The black SUVs swept through the base gates with an efficiency that sent ripples of panic through the event coordinators. Tabitha Weston nearly dropped her replacement clipboard. Floyd Mercer hastily smoothed his uniform and checked his hair in the reflection of a nearby window. Even Gaston Reeves straightened his press badge and tried to look less like someone who had been gleefully harassing homeless women all morning. The senator emerged from the lead vehicle with the practiced grace of a career politician, her silver hair immaculately styled, her smile warm but measured. Behind her came 2 aides, a security detail, and a familiar face that made several people in the crowd stiffen. Staff Sergeant Amber Okafor stepped out of the 3rd SUV, her dark skin gleaming in the afternoon sun, her uniform bearing insignia that no one recognized. She was young, perhaps early 30s, but she moved with the coiled alertness of someone who had seen far more than her years should allow. "Senator Ashford," Tabitha rushed forward, clipboard clutched like a lifeline. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. The ceremony preparations aren't—" "I'm not here for the ceremony." The senator's eyes swept across the plaza, searching for something or someone. "I'm here because I received a very interesting phone call about 30 minutes ago. Something about a disturbance involving a woman near the memorial wall." Floyd stepped forward, his politician's smile firmly in place. "Senator, I can explain. There was a homeless vagrant causing problems, but we have the situation under—" "Where is she?" The question cut through Floyd's prepared speech like a blade. He blinked, momentarily thrown. "I'm sorry?" "The woman. Where is she?" Amber Okafor had already moved, her eyes locking onto the figure beneath the oak tree. Something shifted in her expression, something that looked almost like pain. "Senator," her voice was barely above a whisper. "She's there, by the wall." Delilah Ashford followed her gaze and went very still. The moment stretched into something almost unbearable. Across 40 feet of manicured grass and decades of classified history, 2 women stared at each other. The senator's composure cracked, just for an instant. Her eyes glistened. "My God," she breathed. "Ivory." Amos Pritchard felt his chest constrict. Whatever he had suspected, whatever he had pieced together from old memories and faded patches, the senator's reaction confirmed that the truth was far bigger than he had imagined. "Senator, you know this woman?" Colonel Blackwood approached, his voice carefully controlled. "Know her?" Delilah's laugh was brittle. "Colonel, I authorized her Medal of Honor citation. I sat in the Situation Room and watched the satellite feed when she led her team into Syria to rescue 47 American hostages. I have visited the memorial they built in her honor at Langley." She took a shaky breath. "We thought she was dead. For 5 years we thought she died in the extraction. And now you're telling me she's been living on the street outside this base?" The words landed like bombs, each one sending new shockwaves through the crowd. Floyd Mercer's face had gone gray. Sherry's mouth hung open in a perfect O of horror. Brick Holloway looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Medal of Honor. Syria. 47 hostages. "That's not possible," Gaston's voice cracked. "I checked her records. The database said, The database said whatever we needed it to say. Amber Okafor had reached Ivory's position, but she stopped 3 feet away, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. "Commander, it's me, Raven. I was on your team, Operation Phoenix 2019. Ivory looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "Okafor," the name emerged like a stone dredged from deep water. "You made it out. Because of you." Amber's voice broke. "We all made it out because of you. The ones who survived, anyway." Her hand rose, trembling, toward the memorial wall. 47 stars on that tattoo, one for each person we couldn't save. I saw it once when you got injured during training. You said it was to remember them. The crowd had pressed closer, straining to hear. Phones raised to capture what was rapidly becoming the most unexpected Memorial Day event in Fort Bragg's history. Among them, Ginger Morales clutched her apron, tears streaming unashamedly down her weathered cheeks. For 5 years, she had served coffee to the quiet woman who appeared every Memorial Day. For 5 years, she had wondered about those haunted eyes. Now she knew. Floyd Mercer's mind raced through possibilities, searching for an exit from the disaster his career had just become. "Senator, if I had known..." "Known what, Captain?" Delilah's voice could have frozen steel. "Known that you shouldn't treat human beings like garbage. Known that the uniform doesn't make you better than the people around you. Known that service means more than rank and privilege. I was just following protocol." "Protocol!" The senator's laugh was hollow. "Is it protocol to throw water bottles at decorated veterans? To call them crazy and pathetic and disgusting? Because I have at least 12 phone recordings of this morning's events, Colton, and I have to tell you, the optics are not good." Sherry Mercer made a small sound and tried to melt into the crowd. Her husband grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. But the moment of reckoning was interrupted by a sound that made everyone look up. Helicopters, not one, 3. The distinctive thump of rotor blades grew louder as 3 UH-60 Black Hawks crested the tree line and descended toward Memorial Plaza. Wind whipped across the crowd, sending papers flying and hats tumbling. The birds touched down in perfect formation, their engines screaming before dropping to idle. The side door of the lead helicopter slid open, and a man stepped out. General Silas Crawford moved like a force of nature. 6'3", 220 pounds of muscle earned over 30 years of service. 4 stars gleaming on his collar. His face was carved from granite, but his eyes held something that looked almost like desperation. "Where is she?" His voice cut through the helicopter noise like a blade. "Where's Commander Ghost?" The crowd parted like the Red Sea. General Crawford's eyes found Ivory standing beneath the oak tree, her ragged clothes flapping in the rotor wash, her face expressionless. And then he did something that no one expected. He stopped, squared his shoulders, raised his hand to his brow in a perfect military salute. "Commander Brennan," his voice carried across the suddenly silent plaza. "On behalf of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the United States Army, and the American people, I apologize for how you have been treated today, and I'm here to ask for your help." Ivory did not return the salute. She stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the general, like someone watching an approaching storm. "Silas," her voice was barely audible. "What did you do?" "What I had to." Crawford lowered his salute but maintained his rigid posture. "We found them, Commander. 3 months of searching, and we finally found them. Rodriguez, Chen, Martinez, they're alive. Captured in Yemen, being held by a hostile element we've been tracking since the Syria operation." The names hit Ivory like physical blows. Rodriguez, Chen, Martinez, 3 of her people. 3 members of Phantom who had been listed as missing in action for over a year. "And you came here," her voice cracked, "in helicopters, in front of all these people?" "I came here because our intelligence intercepted a communication from the hostage takers 3 hours ago. They're willing to negotiate, but they have one condition." Crawford's jaw tightened. "They want to deal with you, specifically you. They called you by your call sign, Commander. They know you're alive, and they know where you are. The secret's already out." The crowd had stopped breathing. Somewhere behind Ivory, she could hear the click of cameras, the whisper of phones being raised. Her anonymity, carefully maintained for 5 years, was evaporating like morning frost. "The people who took them," her voice steadied. "Do we know who they are?" Crawford hesitated. Something flickered across his face, an emotion that looked almost like fear. "We have theories, but there's something you need to see first." Something that changes everything we thought we knew about the Syria operation. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a satellite photograph. This was taken 72 hours ago. 3 prisoners, 1 unidentified contact. The analysts enhanced the image of the 4th figure, and he handed her the photograph. Ivory's hands remained steady as she took it. Her face remained composed as she looked down at the grainy image. But something changed in her eyes. Something broke. "No." The word came out as a whisper. "That's not possible." "I know. I thought the same thing. He's dead. I identified the body. I carried his dog tags for 3 years." "I know, Commander, I know." Standing at the edge of the crowd, Amos Pritchard watched Ivory's face crumble and reform, as she processed whatever she saw in that photograph. He did not know what it contained. He did not need to. He had seen that expression before, on the faces of soldiers who had just learned that everything they believed was a lie. "Grandpa?" Connor's voice trembled. "What's happening?" "I don't know, boy." Amos reached out and gripped his grandson's hand. "But I think we're about to find out." Amber Okafor had moved to Ivory's side, close enough now to see the photograph. Her sharp intake of breath was audible across the plaza. "Commander, is that—" "Don't," Ivory's voice cut like a razor. "Don't say his name. Not here. Not yet." General Crawford stepped closer, lowering his voice so that only Ivory and Amber could hear. "The people holding our soldiers, the ones who requested you specifically, they claim to have information about what really happened in 2019, about the hostages we rescued, about the ones we lost." His eyes bored into hers. "They say someone on the inside helped set up that ambush. Someone in Phantom." Ivory's head snapped up. "That's a lie. Maybe, probably, but we won't know for certain until we get our people back and have a conversation with our mysterious contact." Crawford gestured toward the waiting helicopters. "I have a plane standing by at Pope Field. 12 hours from now, you could be in Yemen with a full support team. We get our people out, we find out who's really behind this, and we end it, once and for all. And if I refuse, then 3 good soldiers die in a hole somewhere, and the people responsible never face justice. Your call, Commander." The plaza had become a tableau, dozens of people frozen in place while watching the drama unfold like spectators at a Greek tragedy. Floyd Mercer stood with his wife's hand still trapped in his grip, his career imploding in slow motion around him. Brick Holloway had retreated to the edge of the crowd, his face the color of old milk. Tabitha Weston clutched her clipboard and silently calculated how to spin this disaster into something resembling positive press. Ivory looked at the photograph one more time. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. "I need to say goodbye." Her eyes found the memorial wall. "Give me 5 minutes." Crawford nodded. "Take whatever time you need." She walked toward the wall, her back straight for the first time all day. The crowd parted for her, faces that had sneered now looking away in shame, faces that had laughed now struggling to hold back tears. Ivory reached the wall and placed both palms against the cool granite. She stood there, head bowed, lips moving in silent conversation with the 47 names etched into the stone. Whatever she said, whatever promises she made, remained between her and the dead. Behind her, Ginger Morales approached Dr. Edwin Cho with a small canvas bag. "She left this at my cafe last year." The cafe owner's voice trembled. "Asked me to keep it safe. Said that if anyone ever came looking for her, anyone official, I should give it to them." She pressed the bag into the doctor's hands. "There are letters inside, 47 of them, one for each family who lost someone in that operation." Dr. Cho opened the bag. The letters were written on plain paper, each one carefully folded and labeled, with a name, a rank, a date. 5 years of grief transformed into words. "She's been writing to them," his voice cracked. "All this time, living on the street, and she's been writing letters to the families of her fallen soldiers. Every year," Ginger wiped her eyes. "She comes on Memorial Day, she sits by that wall, and she writes. I never understood until now." Connor Pritchard had broken away from his grandfather and approached Ivory's position. The teenager stopped a few feet away, waiting for her to acknowledge him. When she finally turned, he said something that no one else could hear. Ivory's composure cracked. A single tear escaped, trailing down her weathered cheek. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled the boy into a brief, fierce hug. "You remember?" Connor's voice carried in the sudden quiet. "I remember, kid. I remember all of them." She released him and stepped back. wiped her face with the back of her hand, squared her shoulders. "Commander?" Amber had approached with a folded uniform in her arms. "We brought this for you. In case—" Ivory looked at the cloth. Standard issue fatigues, freshly pressed, insignia already attached, her insignia, rank and unit patches that most people would never recognize. "How did you know I would say yes?" "I didn't." Amber's voice was thick with emotion. "I hoped." Ivory took the uniform, walked behind the oak tree where a maintenance shed provided minimal privacy. When she emerged 3 minutes later, the transformation was complete. The ragged clothes were gone. The haunted homeless woman had vanished. In her place stood Lieutenant Commander Ivory "Ghost" Brennan, her uniform crisp, her posture perfect, her eyes clear and focused. The same crowd that had mocked her now stared in stunned silence. Some of the younger soldiers raised their hands to salute, then hesitated, unsure of the protocol for someone whose rank they had never encountered. General Crawford had no such hesitation. He saluted again, held it until Ivory returned the gesture, then nodded once. "Welcome back, Commander." "I was never gone, General." Her eyes swept across the plaza, taking in every face, remembering every insult, filing away every detail. "I was just waiting." "For what?" Ivory looked at the memorial wall one final time, at the 47 names that had shaped her life for 5 years, at the stars on her tattoo that she would carry until she died. "For them to need me again." She walked toward the helicopters without looking back. Amber fell into step beside her. One by one, other figures emerged from the second and third aircraft, soldiers in unmarked uniforms, specialists whose names would never appear in any official record. Phantom was reassembling, but before Ivory reached the helicopter, Colonel Blackwood stepped into her path. "Commander," his voice was formal, but his eyes held something that might have been shame. "Before you go, on behalf of Fort Bragg, on behalf of everyone who failed you today, I want to apologize. This should never have happened. Not here. Not to anyone." "No," Ivory agreed. "It shouldn't have. What can we do to make this right?" She considered the question for a long moment. Then her gaze shifted to Floyd Mercer, still standing rigid beside his wife, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. "Captain Mercer and Sergeant Holloway will receive letters of counseling in their permanent files, not for what they did to me, for what they would have done to any veteran in my position." Her voice hardened. "There are 40,000 homeless veterans in this country, Colonel. I'm just one of them. Today, I happen to have generals and senators who cared enough to find me. Most of them don't. Remember that. The next time someone in a ragged jacket sits too close to your precious memorial." Blackwood's face flushed. "Understood, Commander." "And her." Ivory's finger pointed at Tabitha Weston, who flinched as if struck. "She stays. Someone needs to take care of this wall when I'm gone. Those names deserve better than a single day of flowers once a year." Tabitha's mouth opened and closed. Finally, she managed a shaky nod. "Yes, Commander. Of course. Whatever you need." Ivory turned away, then paused. "One more thing, Colonel." "Ma'am?" "The old man, Amos Pritchard, he knew my husband. He recognized me before anyone else did, and he tried to help." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Make sure he has good seats tomorrow, front row, his grandson too." She climbed into the helicopter. The door slid shut. Seconds later, the 3 Blackhawks lifted off, banking toward Pope Field and the aircraft that would carry them across an ocean to finish what had been started 5 years ago. On the ground, the crowd remained frozen, processing the whiplash of the past few hours. Cameras had captured everything. Phones held footage that would soon spread across every social media platform on the planet. The homeless woman they had mocked was a Medal of Honor recipient. The vagrant they had threatened to arrest had saved 47 lives. The crazy old lady was Commander Ghost, and she was going back to war. Floyd Mercer finally released his wife's arm. Sherry stepped away from him, her face twisted with something between rage and terror. "This is your fault," she hissed. "I told you not to push so hard. I told you—" "Shut up, Sherry. Don't you tell me to shut up. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to our social standing? Do you have any idea?" "I said shut up." The crowd pretended not to hear. The Mercer marriage, which had been crumbling for years beneath its polished surface, finally collapsed under the weight of public humiliation. Brick Holloway had disappeared entirely. Someone would later find him in the maintenance shed, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at nothing. Gaston Reeves stood very still, his phone hanging limply at his side. For 6 years he had made a career out of tearing people down. Veterans, officers, anyone he blamed for his own failed military career. And today, he had aimed that weapon at someone whose boots he was not fit to polish. His hands trembled as he deleted the footage. All of it, every second. It would not matter. By tomorrow, the video would be everywhere anyway. Chloe Ramirez had already forwarded her recording to 5 of her friends, and they had forwarded it to 5 more. The story of Memorial Plaza was about to become the story of the nation. Ginger Morales sat down heavily on a nearby bench, the bag of letters still visible inside Dr. Cho's medical kit. She had known, in her heart, that the quiet woman who came every Memorial Day was someone special. She had felt it in the way Ivory moved, the way she watched the wall, the way she seemed to carry grief like a physical weight, but she had never imagined this. No one had. Connor Pritchard returned to his grandfather's wheelchair, his young face streaked with tears. "She remembered me, Grandpa, from Kandahar. I was 10 years old, and the building collapsed, and she carried me out. I never knew her name. I never knew any of their names. And all this time, she was right here." Amos pulled his grandson into a hug, his own tears flowing freely. "Sometimes heroes don't wear capes, boy. Sometimes they wear rags. And sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones who fight their battles in silence." The sun continued its arc across the Carolina sky, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded beneath it. The memorial wall stood unchanged, 47 names still etched in granite, still waiting for someone to remember them. But now everyone knew who came to remember. Now everyone knew about Ghost. And somewhere over the Atlantic, in a helicopter racing toward an uncertain future, Commander Ivory Brennan looked at the satellite photograph one more time. The fourth figure in the image, the one standing in shadow, the one whose face the analysts had enhanced with trembling hands. Her husband, Marcus Brennan, killed in action, Somalia, 2005. Except he was not dead. He was standing in a Yemeni prison, very much alive, and someone had a lot of explaining to do. Ivory folded the photograph and slipped it back into her pocket. "Phantom 7, this is Ghost." Her voice was steady now, clear and cold. "I'm coming home." The helicopter banked into the setting sun, carrying her toward answers that had been buried for 20 years. And in Memorial Plaza, the wall kept its silent vigil, 47 names carved in stone, waiting for the living to finish what the dead had started. The Black Hawk cut through the evening sky at 160 knots, its rotors slicing the air with mechanical precision. Inside the cabin, Ivory sat motionless, the satellite photograph still clutched in her hands. Around her, the members of Phantom who had answered the call maintained their own silence, each lost in memories of missions past and the impossible revelation that had just turned their world upside down. Amber Okafor watched her commander from across the cabin. 5 years ago, she had been a young staff sergeant, eager and untested, when Commander Ghost had pulled her from a burning vehicle in the Syrian desert. 5 years ago, she had watched this same woman carry 2 wounded soldiers across half a mile of open ground, while enemy fire turned the sand around them into glass. 5 years ago, she had believed that Ivory Brennan was the strongest person she would ever meet. Now, seeing the cracks in that armor, she understood that true strength was not the absence of pain. It was the decision to keep moving despite it. "Commander," Amber's voice barely carried over the helicopter's drone, "we have 12 hours before insertion. You should rest." "I've been resting for 5 years." Ivory's eyes never left the photograph. "That's long enough." General Crawford had taken the co-pilot seat, leaving the tactical discussions to his subordinates. But his attention remained fixed on the woman he had spent 3 months trying to locate. When the intelligence reports first suggested that Ghost might still be alive, he had dismissed them as wishful thinking. When the satellite imagery placed her at Fort Bragg, sitting beside a memorial wall like a ghost haunting her own grave, he had chartered 3 helicopters and flown across the country to see for himself. Now he watched her study the face of a man who had been declared dead 2 decades ago, and he wondered how many more secrets the Syria operation had buried. His secure phone buzzed. A message from the Pentagon, routed through 6 different encryption protocols. Confirmation, hostage situation, Yemen still active. 3 American prisoners confirmed alive. Fourth individual identity unknown. Enemy commander requests direct negotiation with call sign Ghost. No other terms accepted. Crawford typed his response with steady fingers. Ghost en route. ETA 12 hours. Advise all assets to standby. The phone buzzed again almost immediately. Understood. 1. Additional note. NSA intercept indicates enemy commander has knowledge of Operation Phoenix details. Possible inside leak. Proceed with extreme caution. Crawford deleted the message and stared out the window at the darkening sky. Inside leak. The words echoed in his mind like a death knell. Someone had betrayed Phantom. Someone with access to classified information had sold out their own people. And now that someone was using American hostages as bait to draw Ghost out of hiding. The question was, why? Back at Fort Bragg, the sun had finally set over Memorial Plaza, but the consequences of the day's events were just beginning to unfold. Colonel Jasper Blackwood stood in his office, the phone pressed to his ear, his face the color of old ash. On the other end of the line, a two-star general from the Pentagon was explaining, in very specific terms, exactly how badly he had failed. You're telling me that a Medal of Honor recipient was harassed on your base for 6 hours and no one thought to check her identity? Sir, the record showed exactly what they were designed to show, Colonel. Cover documents. Standard protocol for operators at her level. Any competent intelligence officer would have recognized the signs. Any decent human being would have treated her with basic respect, regardless of her apparent circumstances. Blackwood closed his eyes. Yes, sir. I've already received calls from 3 senators, 2 congressmen, and the Secretary of Defense. The video is trending on every social media platform. By tomorrow morning, Fort Bragg will be synonymous with veteran mistreatment. Is that the legacy you want for your command? No, sir. Then fix it. Captain Mercer and Sergeant Holloway will receive formal reprimands. The event coordinator who threatened to call police on a decorated veteran will issue a public apology. And you, Colonel, will personally ensure that every soldier under your command receives mandatory training on veteran recognition and respect. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir. Good, because if I hear about another incident like this, your next assignment will be counting snowflakes in Alaska. Dismissed. The line went dead. Blackwood set the phone down and stared at the wall of his office, where his own commendations hung in neat rows. 25 years of service, 3 combat deployments, a Bronze Star, and 2 Purple Hearts. And today, he had stood by while his subordinates tormented a woman who had done more for this country than he could ever hope to accomplish. The knock on his door startled him. Enter. Master Sergeant Amos Pritchard wheeled himself into the office, his grandson Connor pushing from behind. The old man's face was set in hard lines, but his eyes held something that looked almost like sympathy. Colonel, we need to talk. Blackwood gestured to the chairs opposite his desk. Master Sergeant, I assume you're here to tell me what a failure I am. You'd be right. Actually, I'm here to tell you a story. Amos positioned his wheelchair and fixed Blackwood with a steady gaze. About a young lieutenant I served with in Somalia, back in '93. Name was Marcus Brennan. Best officer I ever knew, fair, brave, cared about his people more than his career. Commander Brennan's husband. That's right. Marcus died in 2005, or so we thought. Ambush outside Mogadishu. Body was never recovered, but there was enough DNA evidence to make a positive identification. Amos paused, his weathered hands gripping the armrests of his chair. His widow took it hard, harder than anyone knew. She had been climbing the ranks herself, black ops stuff that even I didn't have clearance to know about. After Marcus died, she threw herself into the work, became the best of the best. Commander of a unit that doesn't officially exist. Phantom. That's what they call it now. Used to have a different name, back when I was young enough to care about such things. Amos leaned forward. The point is, Colonel, that woman out there today wasn't just some homeless vagrant. She was a warrior who gave everything for this country, and then gave more. The reason she was living on the street wasn't because she failed, it was because she succeeded too well. Blackwood frowned. I don't understand. The Syria operation. 2019, you've heard of it? Hostage rescue. 47 American civilians held by a terrorist cell. The official story is that a special operations team extracted them with minimal casualties. The official story is a fairy tale. Amos's voice hardened. The truth is that the extraction went sideways from minute 1. Intelligence was bad. The terrorists knew we were coming. It was a trap, Colonel. A trap designed to capture or kill the most elite operators in the American military. Connor shifted uncomfortably. He had heard pieces of this story before, whispered fragments on late nights when his grandfather had too much bourbon, but never the full picture. Commander Brennan led the extraction team. When the ambush hit, she had a choice: retreat and save her own people, or push forward and try to reach the hostages. Any other commander would have pulled back. The odds were impossible. Going forward was suicide. But she went forward. She went forward. Amos's eyes glistened. Led her team through 2 miles of enemy territory, took fire from 3 directions, lost good people along the way. But she got those hostages out. Every single one of the 47 civilians made it home because of her. And her team? 12 operators went in. 7 came out. Amos's voice dropped to a whisper. Ivory carried 2 of the wounded herself. Took 3 bullets doing it. The medics said she should have died 6 times over, but she kept moving, kept fighting, kept saving people until there was no one left to save. Blackwood sat in silence, the weight of the story pressing down on him like a physical force. After Syria, she disappeared. The official report said she died from her wounds during the extraction. Medal of Honor, posthumous. Memorial service at Arlington. The whole 9 yards. Amos shook his head. But she wasn't dead. She just wanted to be. Why? If she's a hero, because heroes don't always feel like heroes, Colonel. Sometimes they feel like failures. Ivory saved 47 hostages, but she lost 5 of her own people doing it. 5 operators who trusted her with their lives. 5 names that she carries on her skin, tattooed over her heart, along with the 47 she couldn't save from an earlier mission. The old man's voice cracked. She came to Fort Bragg because that's where the memorial wall is. That's where her people are remembered. She's been coming every Memorial Day for 5 years just to sit with them, just to remember. The office fell silent. Outside, the sounds of evening taps drifted across the base, the mournful notes of the bugle calling the day to rest. I didn't know, Blackwood finally said. None of us knew. That's the point, Colonel. You didn't know, so you assumed the worst. You looked at a woman in ragged clothes and saw a problem to be solved, not a person to be helped. Amos wheeled himself back toward the door. There are 40,000 homeless veterans in this country. Most of them aren't Medal of Honor recipients. Most of them don't have generals and senators who will fly across the country to rescue them. But every single one of them served. Every single one of them deserves better than what you allowed to happen today. He paused at the threshold. Fix it, Colonel, not because you got caught, because it's right. The door closed behind him, leaving Blackwood alone with his commendations and his shame. Across the base, in the small house they shared in officer housing, Floyd and Sherry Mercer were engaged in the loudest argument of their 7-year marriage. This is your fault! Sherry's voice had risen to a shriek that the neighbors could probably hear through the walls. I told you not to push so hard. I told you to let security handle it. You were the one calling her disgusting, Floyd shot back, his carefully cultivated composure completely shattered. You were the one throwing water bottles and making jokes. Don't you dare put this on me. Because I thought she was nobody. You're the one with the intelligence training. You're the one who should have recognized the signs. What signs? She looked like a homeless woman. She acted like a homeless woman. She stood like a soldier, Floyd. Even I could see that, and I've never served a day in my life. Sherry grabbed a vase from the mantel and hurled it against the wall. The crash of breaking glass punctuated her rage. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to us? My position in the Officers' Wives Association? Our social standing? Your father is going to be humiliated. Floyd went pale at the mention of his father. General Harrison Mercer, 3 stars, currently serving as Deputy Commander of CENTCOM. The man who had smoothed Floyd's path through every stage of his career. The man who expected his son to follow in his footsteps. The man who is probably watching the viral video right now. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a Virginia area code. Don't answer it, Sherry warned. Floyd answered it. Son, his father's voice was ice. We need to talk. Sherry watched her husband's face crumble as the conversation progressed. She could not hear the words on the other end, but she could see their effect. Floyd's shoulders slumped. His free hand trembled. By the time he hung up, he looked 10 years older. What did he say? He said, Floyd's voice caught, he said that I've embarrassed the family name. That everything he built, everything he sacrificed to give me a career, I threw away in one morning of petty bullying. He said that if I ever want to see another promotion, I need to make this right. Publicly. Completely. Make it right how? Floyd looked at his wife with eyes that held no warmth. He said I need to issue a formal apology, on camera, to the entire base. And then I need to request a transfer to a non-command position while I undergo leadership remediation training. Sherry's face twisted. You can't be serious. An apology? To that woman? That woman, Sherry, is a Medal of Honor recipient who saved 47 American lives. That woman has more combat experience than everyone on this base combined. That woman, his voice broke. That woman deserved better than what we gave her. My father is right. I was wrong. The words hung in the air between them, a chasm that could never be bridged. If you apologize, Sherry said slowly, if you humiliate yourself like that, we're done. I won't be married to a man who can't stand up for himself. Floyd looked at his wife, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. He saw the carefully maintained facade, the designer clothes, and perfect makeup that masked a core of pure ambition. He saw the woman who had pushed him to network with the right people, attend the right parties, cultivate the right image. He saw the woman who had never once asked him if he was happy. Then I guess we're done. Sherry stared at him in disbelief. You don't mean that? I do. Floyd straightened his shoulders, and something shifted in his posture, something that looked almost like relief. I've spent 7 years trying to be the man you wanted me to be, the man my father wanted me to be, and today I saw where that path leads. It leads to mocking homeless veterans. It leads to cruelty disguised as protocol. It leads to becoming someone I don't recognize in the mirror. He walked to the door. Where are you going? To write my apology, and then to start figuring out who I actually want to be. The door closed behind him, leaving Sherry alone with the broken vase and the shattered remains of her social ambitions. In a small apartment off base, Sergeant Brick Holloway sat in darkness, his phone clutched in his hands. The screen showed the video that was currently destroying his life. 2 million views and climbing, comments calling him every name imaginable. His face, frozen in a moment of sneering contempt, splashed across news sites and social media feeds around the world. His mother had called 3 times. He had not answered. His ex-wife had texted once. Always knew you were a bully. Now everyone else knows too. His commanding officer had sent an email. Report to my office at 0800 hours tomorrow. Do not be late. Brick had always prided himself on being tough. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, a combat infantry badge, the kind of soldier who could handle anything the enemy threw at him. But this was different. This was not combat. This was shame. The slow, corrosive shame of realizing that you were the villain in someone else's story. He thought about the woman he had mocked, the way she had stood so still, absorbing every insult without flinching. The way her eyes had looked when she turned to face him, empty and ancient and full of a grief he could not comprehend. She had been a commander. She had led men into battle and brought them home. She had done things that would give him nightmares, and she had done them willingly, repeatedly, because her country asked her to. And he had called her a crazy homeless woman. Brick set down his phone and stared at the wall of his apartment. Tomorrow he would face the consequences. Tomorrow his career would likely end, or at least be permanently derailed. Tomorrow he would have to look in the mirror and acknowledge what he had become. But tonight, he would sit in the darkness and think about every veteran he had ever dismissed. Every homeless person he had walked past without a second glance. Every human being he had reduced to a category, a stereotype, a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood. Tomorrow, he would start making amends. Tonight, he would learn what shame really felt like. Gaston Reeves had deleted his footage, but it did not matter. The video was everywhere now, spreading across the internet like wildfire. News outlets were picking it up. Veterans groups were sharing it with furious commentary. Politicians were already drafting statements about veteran treatment and military respect. And everyone, absolutely everyone, wanted to know more about Commander Ghost. Gaston sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by printouts and open browser tabs, trying to piece together the story of his life. Not Ivory Brennan's story. His own. 6 years ago, he had been a promising young soldier with dreams of special forces. Then came the incident that ended everything. A superior officer who gave an order that made no sense. A moment of defiance. A court-martial that stripped away his future and left him with nothing but bitterness and a journalism degree from a community college. He had spent 6 years since then tearing down the military establishment that had rejected him, finding scandals, exposing weaknesses, proving that the system was corrupt and broken and worthy of contempt. And today, he had tried to tear down a woman who represented everything the military could be: a true hero, a selfless servant, someone who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. The realization tasted like ashes in his mouth. His phone rang, an unknown number with a Washington area code. "Mr. Reeves, this is Lieutenant Hugo Tanaka, Military Intelligence. We need to have a conversation about Commander Brennan." Gaston's journalist instincts flared to life. "Is this on the record?" "Nothing about Commander Brennan is on the record, Mr. Reeves. That's the point. But we've been monitoring your activities today, and we believe you may have useful information about certain parties who have taken an unusual interest in her whereabouts." "What kind of parties?" "The kind who would pay significant amounts of money to know exactly where a retired Black Ops commander might be found. The kind who have been searching for Ghost for 5 years. Tanaka's voice hardened. "The kind who are currently holding 3 American soldiers hostage in Yemen." Gaston's blood ran cold. "You think I'm working with terrorists? I think you're a disgruntled former soldier with a grudge against the military and a history of digging into classified operations. I think you have contacts in places that most journalists can't reach. And I think that today's events at Fort Bragg may not have been entirely coincidental. I had nothing to do with..." "Then prove it. Come to the base tomorrow morning. Answer our questions. Help us understand how the people holding our soldiers knew exactly where to find Commander Brennan." A pause. "Or don't, and spend the rest of your life wondering whether your revenge fantasy helped get 3 Americans killed." The line went dead. Gaston stared at his phone, his mind racing. He had not worked with any terrorists. He had not sold information to hostile actors. His pursuit of Ivory Brennan had been nothing more than opportunistic journalism, a chance to create content that would generate clicks and views. But he had made inquiries, reached out to sources, asked questions about homeless veterans near military bases who might have interesting stories. What if someone had been listening? What if his search for a scandal had inadvertently led enemies to a target they had been hunting for years? The weight of the possibility settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. Tomorrow, he would go to the base. Tomorrow, he would answer every question they asked. And if his careless journalism had somehow endangered American lives, he would spend the rest of his career trying to make amends. Some stories were not worth telling. Some secrets deserved to stay buried. 12,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, the military transport aircraft hummed through the night sky, carrying Phantom toward their destiny. Ivory had not slept. She sat in the cargo bay, surrounded by equipment cases and silent warriors, studying the mission briefing that General Crawford had provided. Maps of Yemen, satellite imagery of the compound where the hostages were being held, intercepted communications that painted a picture of an enemy who knew far too much about operations that should have remained classified forever. The enemy commander had called himself the Collector. No real name, no confirmed identity, just a shadow who had appeared 5 years ago, shortly after the Syria operation, and had been methodically hunting down members of Phantom ever since. Rodriguez, Chen, Martinez. 3 operators who had survived Syria, only to be captured 18 months later during what should have been a routine training mission in Jordan. Someone had betrayed them. Someone had known exactly where they would be and when. And now, the Collector wanted to trade them for Ghost. "Commander," Amber appeared at her elbow, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You need to eat something. We're 4 hours out." Ivory accepted the coffee but did not drink. "Tell me about the 8th member." Amber stiffened. "Commander?" "On the helicopter before we left. You said something about Unit 7 actually having 8 members, that the 8th one's file is classified like mine." Ivory's eyes bored into her subordinate. "Who are you talking about?" The silence stretched between them, filled with the drone of engines and the whisper of recycled air. Her call sign was Spectre. Amber's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "She was on the Syria extraction team, one of the 5 we thought we lost. I remember Spectre. I carried her body to the extraction point myself. You carried a body, Commander, but we never confirmed it was her. The DNA results were inconclusive. And 6 months ago, NSA intercepted a communication from a terrorist cell in Libya that used her old code phrases, phrases that only someone who knew her personally would recognize. Ivory's hands tightened around the coffee cup. You're telling me Spectre might be alive? I'm telling you that someone out there knows things that only Spectre would know. Whether that means she's alive, or that she was captured and interrogated, or that she turned... Amber shook her head. We don't know. That's one of the questions we're hoping to answer in Yemen. Does Crawford know? It's why he came to get you personally. The hostage situation is real, but it's also an opportunity. If we can capture the collector, if we can interrogate him, we might finally understand what happened in Syria, why the intelligence was bad, who betrayed us. Amber's voice hardened. And whether Spectre is a victim or a traitor. Ivory stared at the mission briefing, but her mind was somewhere else. 20 years in special operations had taught her that the world was rarely black and white. Heroes became villains, friends became enemies. The only constant was the mission, but this mission was personal in ways that she had never anticipated. Her husband, supposedly dead for 20 years, standing in a Yemeni prison. Her former teammate, supposedly dead for 5 years, potentially working with the enemy. The collector, who knew her call sign and her location and God knew what else. All of it connected, all of it leading back to her. What aren't you telling me, Okafor? Amber hesitated. Then she pulled a folded paper from her pocket and handed it to Ivory. This came in 30 minutes ago, intercepted communication from the collector to his superiors. We don't know who those superiors are, but we know what they want. Ivory unfolded the paper and read the message. Ghost confirmed en route. Operation Phoenix files secure. Brennan factor verified. Proceed with Phase 3 upon her arrival. The truth about Syria will finally be revealed. The truth about Syria. Ivory read the words 3 times, her mind racing through possibilities. They're not trying to kill me, she said slowly. They're trying to expose something. Something about the Syria operation that's been hidden. That's our analysis as well. Amber's face was grim. Commander, there's been speculation for years that the Syria extraction went wrong because of bad intelligence, that someone deliberately fed us false information to walk us into a trap, but we never found proof. We never found a motive. And now someone wants to provide both. It appears so. The question is why, and whether the truth they're planning to reveal is actually the truth or just another layer of deception. Ivory folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket, next to the photograph of her husband. Wake the team. Full mission brief in 30 minutes. And Okafor, Commander, whatever we find in Yemen, whatever truth is waiting for us, I need to know that you have my back, that everyone on this team has my back, no matter what. Amber straightened to attention. We followed you into Syria, Commander. We'll follow you into Yemen, and we'll follow you straight into the fire if that's where the mission takes us. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But even as she said it, Ivory knew that hope was a luxury she could not afford. The pieces were moving on a board she could not see, controlled by players whose motives she did not understand. All she could do was what she had always done: move forward, find the truth, bring her people home, whatever the cost. The compound emerged from the pre-dawn darkness like a scar on the Yemeni landscape. Stone walls, guard towers, the burned-out hulk of a vehicle that had been there so long it had become part of the scenery. Ivory studied it through her night vision scope, counting guards and mapping patrol routes. 8 hours of flight time had given her team plenty of opportunity to plan, but plans were just guesses dressed in confidence. The real test would come when boots hit ground. Phantom 7, this is Overwatch. Crawford's voice crackled in her earpiece. Satellite confirms 3 heat signatures in the main building. 4th signature intermittent. Could be your high-value target moving between locations. Copy, Overwatch. Any sign of additional hostiles? Negative. Guard count matches our estimates. But Ghost, we're picking up some unusual electronic emissions from the eastern structure. Could be nothing. Could be a communication hub. Could be a trap. Everything about this operation could be a trap. Ivory lowered her scope. We proceed anyway. Phantom, on me. The team moved like shadows, 7 operators who had trained together, bled together, buried friends together. They reached the outer wall without incident, scaled it without sound, and dropped into the compound with the silent precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The first guard never saw them coming, neither did the second. By the time the third realized something was wrong, Amber had already secured him with zip ties and a gag. Clear to the main building, Ivory whispered into her comm. Moving. They flowed through the darkness like water, each operator covering their sector with the automatic discipline of countless rehearsals. The main building loomed ahead, its windows dark, its door slightly ajar. Too easy. Ivory raised her fist, halting the team. Something's wrong. Commander? The door. It's open. And the guards we've taken down were positioned for show, not for security. Someone wants us to get inside. Amber moved to her shoulder. Could be arrogance. Could be incompetence. Or could be exactly what we came for. Ivory made her decision. New plan. I go in alone. Everyone else holds position and covers the exits. If this goes sideways, you extract without me. Commander, protocol says, protocol can go to fire. Ivory checked her weapon one final time. This is personal. It's been personal since they called me by name. Whatever's waiting in there, it's waiting for me. And I won't risk anyone else until I know what we're dealing with. She did not wait for arguments. She moved through the door and into the darkness beyond. The interior of the building smelled of dust and cordite and something else, something familiar, a perfume that she had not smelled in 20 years. Hello, Ivory. The voice came from the shadows at the far end of the room, a woman's voice, soft and measured and achingly familiar. I've been waiting for you. A figure stepped into the pale light that filtered through a broken window. Medium height, athletic build, dark hair shot through with gray, eyes that held the same emptiness Ivory saw in her own mirror. Spectre. You're supposed to be dead. Ivory's weapon remained steady, aimed at center mass. I carried your body out of Syria. You carried a body, not my body. Spectre smiled, and there was no warmth in it. A lot of people have been supposed to be dead over the years. Your husband, for instance. Want to see him? She gestured toward a door at the back of the room. He's in there, along with Rodriguez, Chen, Bragg, Boisim Chen, and Martinez. All alive, all unharmed, all waiting for you to make a choice. What choice? The truth, Ivory. That's all I've ever wanted. The truth about Syria. The truth about what really happened. The truth about why 12 operators went in and only 7 came out. Spectre's voice hardened. The truth about who gave the order that killed 5 of our friends. The terrorists killed them. We were ambushed. Yes. But who told the terrorists where we would be? Who provided the exact coordinates of our insertion point? Who made sure that the enemy would be waiting for us with overwhelming force? Ivory's finger tightened on the trigger. You think there was a traitor. I don't think. I know. Spectre pulled a folder from her jacket and tossed it at Ivory's feet. It's all there. Communications intercepts, financial records, the whole trail. Someone in our own command sold us out for money and ideology. Someone whose name you know very well. And Marcus? How does my husband fit into this? Marcus discovered the truth. That's why they had to silence him. But they didn't kill him. Killing him would have raised too many questions. So they made him disappear, held him in black sites around the world for 20 years, moving him every few months to avoid detection. Spectre's eyes glittered. He's been alive this whole time, Ivory. Alive and waiting for someone to find him, to find the truth. The room spun around Ivory. 20 years. 20 years of grief. 20 years of mourning a man who had been locked in a cell somewhere, wondering if anyone was looking for him. Why? Her voice cracked. Why do all this? Why kidnap our people? Why lure me here? Because I couldn't do it alone. I've been gathering evidence for 5 years, ever since I realized I wasn't dead after all, that the people who left me for dead in Syria had also left me with pieces of the puzzle. But the final piece requires someone with your clearance, someone who can access the files that prove what really happened. And if I refuse? Spectre's smile faded. Then we have a problem, because the man who betrayed us, the man who sold out Phantom, is currently sitting in an office at the Pentagon. And without your help, without your testimony, he'll continue to destroy lives and protect secrets forever. Who? Spectre reached into her pocket and pulled out a photograph. She held it up so Ivory could see. General Silas Crawford, the man who had flown across the country to find her, the man who had saluted her in front of dozens of witnesses, the man who had sent her on this mission. No, Ivory shook her head. That's not possible. Silas was there. He was one of us. He was never one of us. He was their creature from the beginning, a plant placed in special operations to identify and eliminate anyone who got too close to the truth. Spectre lowered the photograph. Why do you think he was so eager to find you, Ivory? Why do you think he pushed so hard to get you on this mission? He's not trying to rescue our people. He's trying to tie up loose ends, and the biggest loose end is you." The words hung in the air like poison. Ivory looked at the folder on the floor, at the photograph in Spector's hand, at the door that supposedly led to her husband. 20 years of grief, 5 years of hiding, and now this. "I need proof," she said finally. "More than documents and accusations. I need to see Marcus. I need to hear it from him." Spector stepped aside and gestured toward the door. "Then go. But Ivory, whatever you find in there, whatever you decide to do next, remember one thing." "What?" "I didn't bring you here to destroy you. I brought you here because you're the only one strong enough to finish this, to expose the truth, to burn down everything they've built on lies and betrayal." Spector's voice softened. "You're the only one who can finally set us free." Ivory walked to the door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. Behind her, she heard Amber's voice in her earpiece. "Commander, we're reading unusual movement outside the compound. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. ETA 7 minutes. Crawford's voice followed immediately. "Ghost, I'm seeing the same thing. Hostile reinforcements inbound. Recommend immediate extraction." Spector smiled grimly. "Right on schedule. He must have realized I'm not playing by his rules anymore." Ivory made her choice. She opened the door. The room beyond was small and bare, lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. 3 figures sat against the far wall, their hands bound, their faces gaunt but alert. Rodriguez, Chen, Martinez, her people, alive. And in the corner, sitting alone on a metal cot, was a man she had mourned for 2 decades. Marcus, he looked up. The years had carved deep lines into his face, turned his hair gray, stolen the youth from his eyes, but she would know him anywhere, in any lifetime, in any form. "Ivory," his voice was rough from disuse. "You came." She crossed the room in 3 steps and dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands touched his face, his shoulders, his chest, confirming that he was real, that he was alive, that this was not another dream from which she would wake screaming. "I never stopped looking." Tears streamed down her face. "I never stopped believing." "I know." He pulled her close, and his arms were weaker than she remembered, but still warm, still familiar, still home. "I always knew you would find me. It just took longer than I expected." "Commander," Amber's voice cut through the moment. "Vehicle's 2 minutes out. We need to move." Ivory pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Can you walk?" "I can do whatever I need to do." Marcus struggled to his feet, and she saw the damage that 20 years of captivity had done. Thin, frail, but still standing, still fighting. "Then let's go home." They moved. Ivory led them through the building, past Spector, who fell in beside them, past the guards who had been neutralized, into the compound where the rest of Phantom was holding position. In the distance, the growl of approaching engines grew louder. "Overwatch, this is Ghost. Hostages secured. Exfil now." Silence on the comm. "Overwatch, respond." More silence. And then Crawford's voice, cold and calm. "I'm sorry, Ghost, but I can't let you leave with what you know." The first explosion hit the western wall, sending chunks of stone flying through the air. The second took out the guard tower. The third struck so close that Ivory felt the heat wash over her like a wave. "Everyone down! Move to the secondary extraction point!" They ran. Through the smoke and chaos, through the screaming darkness, through the hell that Crawford had unleashed to bury his secrets forever. Amber took point, laying down cover fire. Rodriguez and Chen supported Martinez, whose leg had been damaged by shrapnel. Marcus ran beside Ivory, matching her pace despite his weakness. And Spector brought up the rear, her weapon spitting fire at the shapes that emerged from the approaching vehicles. "There!" Amber pointed toward a drainage ditch that led away from the compound. 50 meters! They made it with seconds to spare. The compound behind them erupted in a final massive explosion that turned the night into day. In the ditch, gasping for breath, Ivory counted heads. Everyone present. Everyone alive. "Crawford tried to kill us," her voice was ice. "He called in an airstrike on his own people. He's been trying to kill us for years." Spector pressed a hand against a bleeding wound on her arm. "Now you believe me?" "Now I believe you." Marcus reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes held something she had not seen in decades. Hope. "What do we do now?" he asked. Ivory looked at the burning compound, at her team, at her husband, at the woman who had spent 5 years gathering evidence of betrayal. Now we go home, she said, and we burn it all down. The sun was rising over Yemen, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere across an ocean, a general was celebrating his apparent victory, believing that Ghost and her secrets had finally been buried forever. He was wrong. Phantom was alive, the truth was in their hands, and the reckoning was coming. Ivory activated her emergency beacon, signaling to assets that Crawford did not control. Help would come. It always came for those who refused to give up. Phantom 7, she said into the dawn, this is Ghost. Operation Phoenix complete, package secured, and we have one hell of a story to tell. The beacon pulsed into the lightning sky, carrying her message to allies unknown. Behind her, the compound burned. Ahead of her, justice waited. And in her pocket, the photograph of her husband, the folder full of evidence, and the weight of 20 years of lies transformed into something new. Purpose. The fight was not over. It was just beginning. What you just witnessed is more than entertainment. It is a mirror held up to our society, reflecting how easily we judge those who appear to have nothing, while remaining blind to the sacrifices they carry in silence. Ivory Brennan did not wear her medals on her chest. She did not demand recognition or respect. She simply sat beside the names of those she loved and lost, honoring them in the only way she knew how. And for that, she was mocked, threatened, treated as less than human. The lesson is painfully simple. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The homeless veteran on the corner may have saved lives you will never count. The quiet stranger in worn clothes may carry scars from protecting freedoms you enjoy every day. Appearance tells you nothing about the soul beneath. There are over 40,000 homeless veterans in America right now. 40,000 men and women who raised their hands, took an oath, and served their country. They do not need your pity. They need your respect, your acknowledgement, your willingness to see them as human beings worthy of dignity. So, here is your call to action. The next time you encounter someone society has discarded, pause, look them in the eye, offer a word of kindness. You may never know their story, but you can choose to treat them as if their story matters, because it does. Every story matters, every veteran matters, and sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never ask to be seen.